I'd like to call this special meeting of the Lompoc City Council to order. Today is Tuesday, March 24th. City Clerk, could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Mosby.
Here.
Councilmember Vega.
Here.
Councilmember Holmdahl.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dirk Starbuck.
Present.
Mayor Bob Lingle.
Here. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to have oral communications. This is your opportunity to speak to the council concerning any item you choose for 3 minutes.
A few things that we need to work on in Lompoc is trying to bring in business. Everybody knows that and everybody tries that, but I think there's a few things that we could do that would help our businesses, and that would be a lot of cleanup on our streets and stuff, especially in the downtown area and the alleys and stuff in there. Make it look a little more respectful on buildings that are up. If we could encourage people to do a little better painting and stuff like that. And, we just need to make a nicer looking town if we can. It's not that it's bad looking, it's just that we could clean it up and do a few things to it and make it nicer. There's a lot of businesses that are owned by the city, and I noticed, I went around and looked at a lot of them, and I don't understand, number one, why the city owns 110 different, I shouldn't say businesses, properties. It doesn't seem like it's a good thing. It seems like we should have people in there running it and doing it and taking care of a lot of them properties instead of the city. I think the city needs to look into that and see what's going on and do some things that are more productive. You know, we've tore down bowling alley that was good for our kids to come in here and bowl, plus the adults. My wife bowled down there twice a month, and they had a lot of fun down there. They took it down and put in senior housing. We got more price senior housing and low-cost housing than any city in the nation. I don't think that's a good thing for us. I think it cost us money. I know we're getting reimbursed for some of it, but I just don't think it's a good thing. I think we need businesses in here that handle these properties. I think that the city needs to get involved in bigger things, better things, and put something in maybe down at Surf Beach. I know they have the birds down there. There's probably something we could get rid of and do something down there, but I think if the city got involved in that and try to do something where we could bring in tourists and stuff, people to come down there and surf and hang out at the beach and do things, good stuff. The racetrack that they're trying to do, I think that's a great thing. Help with that. Get involved in it. Try and get that racetrack going if that's what we're going to do. We've already spent a bunch of money on it. Let's get behind it and do it, you know, and it's going to bring in tourists. It's going to fill up the hotels and the motels and everything and get something happening. So I think it'd be a good idea to do something like that. There's just a lot of things that I think we need to work on, but we need to pick a couple of them and go with it and try and do a little bit at a time and work together on it and make it happen. There's a lot of good ideas. I've got a lot of them I've worked on for a long time, but I don't have time to bring them all up today. But I think we need to get after it. Probably the first thing is that's running already is a racetrack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray.
Hi, council members. Good evening. My name is Melinda Aguirre. We believe the library is vital to the life of the Lompoc community, and we hope council will fund the library at a level to ensure quality staff and great outcomes for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Tony Ostini, resident. Sorry I didn't get my card filled out. I'll fill it out and give it to you. One thing that's really dear to my heart is the gateways to our community, both at coming in at Highway 1 and 246 and 135 out at the Y area and Harris Grade. It's a project that I think should be looked into. I think we can do a lot with landscaping. go around and look at some of our communities, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara. You can hide a lot of unattractive parts of your community with landscaping. If we could tree line this, starting with low shrubs, trees, whatever. I know there's an organization coming on right now that wants to do community service. I think it's our community churches that are gathering now to do something like that. If we could work with Caltrans, the street people, and put something together like that, so our community is more welcoming, and as people come in, we are having more tourists come in. We're having more visitors come to our community, and if we can make our gateways look a little bit more attractive. And I would really like to see maybe more pedestrian-friendly areas in the old downtown area, and that means we need to slow the traffic down so people will stop and shop. If we're just zooming through like a highway with just 4 lanes going through, people aren't stopping and shopping. And maybe to consider something with the meridian down the center with some trees, bring it down to 2 lanes, a couple blocks either way, and make it more pedestrian-friendly, where people are going to stop, park, walk, shop, have a cup of coffee, a sandwich, lunch, a glass of wine at Divine. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so seeing no one rise, we're going to close oral communication and bring it to new business. This new business is we're going to be continuing our discussion on the setting of City Council priorities. Let's see, who wants to begin? Councilmember Starbuck.
I wanted to make sure you remembered my name.
Oh, good. Okay.
I'll go ahead and start with already established council priorities. We'll go down to the code enforcement area and say, okay, well, what do we want to do with code enforcement? Well, this is a good question. Has it been effective? Does it work? Is it accomplishing our goals? I really don't think so. I think maybe since it is on our list of priorities, first I'd like to ask the city administrator if he's got any direction he intends to go with it, and then I'd like to give some input into it for myself.
Well, definitely we've got a ways we can go, and for those of you that were on the interview panel, the 3 of you that were on the interview panel at the time I was being interviewed for this job, I even talked about it as a relative newcomer, talking about some of the issues and challenges I felt as an outside fresh set of eyes that I felt the community had in terms of community appearance in some cases, some neighborhoods that could stand to have a little more pride of community and things we can do as a city to help people to make available, make use of resources that are available to help, improve their own properties, to improve their neighborhoods, and how we can partner together. These code enforcement activities, whether in this city or in a lot of other cities, I think is always a mixed success. I mean, you're going to have some levels of success and some things that are still challenges. It is clear to me, and I realize this gets into an area that gets controversial. I believe that communities should have standards, and standards relatively high, worth reaching for. I personally believe we should set a high bar and reach for that. Expect the best for us. I think that helps us all, those of us at least that are property owners within the city. It can improve property values by having an expectation that our standards are going to be high. You adopt a set of laws in the course of adopting municipal code requirements. You set the code that sets those standards. Where we get into some controversy sometimes, and maybe some of the things you're going to discuss, and certainly something that's a bit of a frustration for me at times, is while we might adapt certain standards that we want to achieve, on the other hand, we as staff become criticized for enforcing those same codes that have been adopted, for being too strict, too harsh, too inflexible. And I see it a different way. I think we should be fairly stringent in how we enforce our code. However, we should have resources available so it's practical for people to be able to comply. You know, I like those situations where we can talk to somebody about an area that they are maybe having some challenges with on their property, but we also come with some solutions that are available for them to help them through. So, you know, I like that. I like the things we do with graffiti, for instance, that we require them to paint over their graffiti, but also we can provide them some resources to be able to help them. Either we can do some work on their behalf, or we can give them vouchers for paint. There's a lot of things we can do in that regard. That's one little example. But on the flip side of all this, I certainly do believe if we have codes that are on the books that we really don't want enforced, that we don't think that should be the standard, then I think we should go about changing the code then. Rather than putting it, you know, those of us involved in code enforcement in that constant conflict point where we've taken an oath saying we'll enforce the laws and then are being turned around and told you shouldn't enforce the laws. That's a bad situation for us to be in. The final thing I'd point out is the codes that we enforce are not always just the municipal, just the city code. Sometimes we're carrying out some state standards, for instance, and occasionally some federal ones, but state compliance becomes an issue that we have to get involved with as well. And unfortunately, we end up having to be the bad guys, so to speak, the enforcers of some of those. But that's our role, and that's what we do when we carry it out. I think, having seen our code enforcement activities in play here and in other communities, I'd say actually we do a pretty darn good job in our interactions with people, by and large, for the most part. You know, there's always going to be some people who would describe their interactions as being unpleasant, but for the most part, we handle them in a pretty, what I see as a pretty pleasant manner. Certainly, and the individual, for instance, who goes out and does most of our contacts is far more, I think he's much better suited for the job than, say, I would be if I were out there on that. I don't know if I have all the patience and the diplomacy that he does, and I admire it greatly. I also think that that we're radically understaffed in our code enforcement right now, because we've got basically one person who handles a lot of the field activity himself alone, and then we have another individual that sort of helps with some other issues, not quite full-time on all of that. And that's it, what we have. And we've got a pretty good lot-sized city. You know, I compare that with where I came from, where on a per capita basis, we probably had 3 or 4 times the amount of people. You know, it's not just that we had 3 or 4 times. It was, you know, it was a city 12 times the size, but had about 50 times the presence in terms of code enforcement. So I think we don't have enough resources to do the full job I'd like to see. Whether in this budget cycle or the next one, I think we've got to look at expanding that. But certainly part of the priority setting here, and what you might want to lay out, is that if you want to see priority given to a different method of enforcement, or that you want to give prioritization to more of those programs that help people to come into compliance with code enforcement infractions and violations and the like, then we can certainly give that the priority and give that some budget attention.
Hold on one second. Councilmember Starbuck, if you'll indulge me for a minute, hold your thoughts on code enforcement for a second, because I should have asked a couple of questions. Just for the members of the community out there right now, I want to sort of go back to the last meeting and let you know where we went and where you're coming into. So at the last budget or council priorities meeting, we set 5 new priorities: public safety, parks, economic development / jobs, code enforcement / graffiti, and infrastructure. So what I'd like to see, and I'll bring it to the council for a little bit of discussion on this, on two of these items, public safety and economic development, at the last meeting, we discussed some of the focus points on those. If we're still happy with the 5 priorities we set and the focus points, this meeting I'd like to see us, unless you choose differently, I'd like to see us focus on the other 3, which code enforcement is one of the other 3. So we can discuss those. As far as the 5 priorities, do we still agree that these 5 that we set last time are our 5 priorities? Could I either get a consensus or?
I'm good.
Councilmember Mosby? Okay. So we'll stick with these 5. These are our top 5 priorities. That doesn't mean that other things are not important. I'm going to take, for example, I see some of our members that represent the library out there. Just because the library is not one of the top priorities for everyone out there, that does not mean that we are not concerned about our libraries. We are definitely concerned about our libraries. And that is being taken care of other ways. So getting back to code enforcement now. Yes, the city administers some items or issues. And
Well, just a couple of things. You know, we've all agreed, okay, code enforcement and graffiti is one of our priorities. We haven't fixed the problem, and I think we should give some direction to staff on what we expect out of this. I've got a couple of notes that I've jotted here. Personally, I don't like the neighbor versus neighbor turning each other in that we currently drives our code enforcement policy. I think that we need to be a little bit more proactive, but I think that we need to go in and update our policy. I don't think it's effective in the sense of what we do. We go into a poor neighborhood, we ravish through there with code enforcement on the people that are the least able to afford to fix it. We also have, I guess, a different angle on code enforcement that goes out and does building and water heater and easements. I can't tell you how many people have come to me about receiving tickets on building on the city's easement. One such, if they were to follow the city's rules, would have a 6-inch front yard. It's ridiculous. I think that we need to do a policy update on this and make a code enforcement policy that deals strictly with, say, health and safety or specific eyesores, rodent-type issues, and not the peeling paint and harassment. It's almost become that we use code enforcement to retaliate against people that do something here. I'm not happy with it, you know, and I just think that it's something that needs to be fixed and made better.
so this would be one of our focus points under code enforcement. And I would be in favor of it, if I could get someone else, is to have several of us or someone look at our code policies, our code ordinances, and look for a review. This is what you're looking for? Review of our policies.
To do something with it. We made it a policy, you know, a big priority years ago, and it's just kind of gone away, and we're back to business as normal with this. And I just don't think it's right, and it's not fair to the citizens, you know.
And I'm hearing you, and I agree with you. I'd like us become more proactive. So one of the focus points on code enforcement would be somehow becoming more proactive, and maybe staff can come back to us with a way of becoming more proactive, and also a review of our current codes, whether that is an ad hoc committee, whether it's staff coming back to us with a review, but a review of our policies, our code policies right now. As far as becoming proactive, I had mentioned at one time, this isn't it may not be the solution, but we have city employees out every single day. We have police, we have fire, we have our trash collectors. We have them out in our neighborhoods every single day. So if they see something that is a violation, they could be making notes and bring it back to our code enforcement officer instead of neighbor calling on neighbor. That would be one possible solution. I'm not saying that is the end all, but it's a possibility that we'd have more eyes out there than just relying on the neighbors reporting neighbors. Is that something what you had in mind?
Well, I wasn't looking for a Gestapo and a whole group of 400 people out there looking at code enforcement, but I mean, to just give the 2 or 3 people that we have in code enforcement a little bit of guidance on what to do, because I know that a lot of what's happened is they're doing it because that's what our policy says, and I don't think our policy is up to date on it. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess the last time it was looked at.
Sure. And I don't know, I'm assuming the rest of the council members are the same thing as me. I get calls from citizens on a regular basis, I'm not going to say on a daily basis, about an issue because they have an issue maybe with a neighbor, with someone else, and they'll call me, I'll bring it over to our code enforcement officer. So just so you all know, and those are we televising this? Okay, so if you're watching this, we used to have a policy that you could not submit an anonymous violation. That is no longer true. You can submit an anonymous violation. So if I want to turn in Councilmember Starbuck, and I don't want him to know about it, I can turn in an anonymous complaint. So, Councilmember Mosby.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about your proactive code enforcement, and proactive code enforcement, I might see it differently than what you see. And I've heard you say when you're running, one of the items that you have is you would kind of turn the trash collectors and any other city worker into a code enforcement, junior code enforcement officer, so to say. And I had an opportunity, unfortunately, to witness this, a degree of this proactive code enforcement where the city went out with a search warrant and tried to search inside of an individual's house because they thought there might be something inside this gentleman's house. And they were on top of this guy, and whether it was a neighbor or whoever kept being on top of it. And he's in line for open heart surgery now. And a lot of it's done because the city in the last couple of years has been proactively code enforcing. And I was asked to come along. The gentleman asked me to stand by his side because he was very frustrated. And one day, 4 armed police officers came over to search his yard, along with Boggs. They found 2 violations in this gentleman. They got in his garage. He was able to formulate a letter and keep him out of his house. But they found that he didn't have an earthquake strap on his water heater. And his door on his electrical panel had been removed because somebody hooked a ground wire to it. But in the meantime, this guy's, again, he's bright red. He's like I said, he's in line for open heart surgery now, and a lot of it is the stress on this factor. And I think what we need to do as a community, there's a lot of items out there. You can just go about anybody's house and find a code violation. For chickens, a lot of people don't realize chickens aren't legal still. The city has talked about it. In fact, that very same day that I was there, the neighbor next door had a rooster crowing, which is definitely a no-no. And I asked Mr. Boggs if he knew what that was, and he didn't know what that was. But he wouldn't do anything anyways because nobody filed a complaint.
Yeah.
But I think what we need to do is we've got storage sheds. So many people have storage sheds. We have a code of that, 10 foot from a house, 5 foot from a property line. There's hundreds of those in town that don't meet that. Probably the biggest violation is your garage. If you have a 2-car garage, it has to be a 2-car garage. It can't be a musician's headquarters. It can't be whatever, storage with 1 car. And I would say an apartment. And there's probably, I don't know, 80, 90%. We drive the streets. You see if a garage door is open, you look inside. Majority of these couldn't get 2 cars in them if they are a 2-car garage. Now, that was one of the things they did say to him, too, because this gentleman, he had 2 motorcycles in there, but it was a 2-car garage, so he had some other stuff there. So he had to get his stuff out of his garage so that he could make sure he got 2 cars in his garage. But if we went in the proactive aspects and went door to door to door to door, I don't think that's what Lompoc wants. I haven't heard that's what Lompoc wants. I think if we get proactively maybe finding out what some of the big issues are, we publicize it in newspapers or along with the electric billing and say, hey, this is what the code is. And I think a lot of people will try to heal it themselves if they really do. When I tell people chickens aren't on the list, right? We talked the other day, one of the planning commissioners, I won't say who the person is, but they have chickens and they didn't realize that chickens weren't legal. I talked to somebody else just a little while ago. They said, chickens aren't legal? So, I mean, I think if people were educated on the process and understood that a lot of this is the situation, and the reason why do we have 2-car garages? Maybe that's something we want to change. And I was watching a program where the garage is kind of the center of intervention in a lot of places. And in this program, they were identifying, they said the garage is where invention is born. Disney was invented in the garage. Mattel, Apple Computers, Harley Davidson, and many musical groups. But if we enforce this code, this 2-car garage, we might miss out on some of that. So, I mean, I don't know how deep you guys want to go on it. I haven't been happy. I didn't like the vision that of a proactive, hardcore code enforcement, which has been ran, in this gentleman's eyes, it's a form of harassment. And I'm for people going by the ordinances, but a lot of people don't even know what the ordinances are.
Okay, so Councilmember Starbuck would like us to become more proactive. And remember, my comments about police, fire, trash collectors is just an example. I'm not saying we're going that way. It's a possibility to have more eyes open out there. But if this council chooses to become, at least looking at becoming more proactive, we have to give some direction to staff how we want to do that. You want to review all the codes? We can do that. But the major violations, I don't think we're actively, I don't know what this person was originally being reported for. I just don't know. You may know. But I don't think we're actively going after someone looking in their garage and finding out if they have their water heater strapped, which it is I believe it's a health and safety code. Is that correct, Chief? Building code. So, I mean, it's something that we just don't invent. It's a code there. So, okay, Councilman Starbuck.
What I'd like to suggest here is I think the word proactive is, in my case, is being used to call off the neighbor versus neighbor. I think really what we should do is go back to ground zero and just look at our policy. It doesn't hurt to look at policies, but we've found many policies that haven't been looked at in 25 years, fees, some of them. Let's come up with a policy that works for Lompoc, something that could be proactive. Turning loose all city employees, I'm certainly not in favor of that. They got jobs to do other than to run the bogs. And I think maybe looking towards the health and safety aspect of it first. There's going to be certain people that are going to be issues, but at least we'll be able to kind of control what we're doing. I mean, to cite people for putting a fence or a bush on the city's easement, with the easements that we have in this city, I think we ought to just write that out right from the gate.
Okay, so we're still directing staff to look at somehow revising our code enforcement. Okay. Is everyone in favor of that? Councilmember Humdahl.
I have no disagreement with what you're saying, but I don't think it should be only staff. We need to look at what we have, and then if we want to make some modification of change. I don't think everybody's worried about anything that is behind the closed doors as much as what it looks like going down the street, and looking at and making it look decent coming into town. Have it clean. If you got weeds in your yard, then get the damn weeds out of there.
Councilmember Vega.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Mayor, you made a comment that someone called you and issued a complaint, and you took the code enforcement guy over there. Is that correct? I mean,
If someone calls me with an issue, I'll bring it over to our code enforcement officer, give them the complaint. They do the investigation. I don't do any investigation myself.
that was my point. I don't think we want to get into everyone calling us and we bypass the code enforcement guy or go in front of them, okay?
No, I'm not saying that, but
Okay.
we all, if you haven't, you will. You'll have someone call and give you an issue, and I just write it down, bring it over to code enforcement officer, and let them investigate it. So I don't get involved in the investigation, and I don't think any of us should. Oh, one other thing, and put it as one of the focus points. At the prior council, we voted as a council to have a letter issued by the mayor, and that has been going on for 2 to 4 years, something like that. It's still going on right now. I'd like to have that come back to the council to decide whether we want to still have that done. It was by a prior council that issued that. I'd like to see it just come back for the entire council. We're not going to make the decision tonight. I'd just like to have it come back for the decision. Councilmember Mosby.
Is there a way we could categorize the last year's code enforcement that's gone out? What has been the violation, so we can see what the priorities our code enforcement officers found, whether they're water heaters, whether they're building sheds, whether they're easements, what they might be, so we can identify these issues that seem to be the priority of codes that are being violated. And then we could also look at these codes and see if there's something maybe that we need to modify the code, or maybe we need to put out there in massively public notice, hey, these are some of these codes, and let the public be proactive themselves.
And I'm sure we can, City Administrator, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming we can tabulate the major codes over the past couple of years, what we've received?
Yes, the code enforcement officer reports to me weekly
Okay.
as to the number of cases opened and closed, and we'd be able to characterize that
You
for
could
you.
categorize them as to water heaters as opposed to chickens, yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what precise information is in the database, but we could give you categories.
Okay. Is that, Councilmember Mosby, is that okay?
I think we'd actually probably need to find something a little bit more specific, because if we're looking at specific codes, maybe,
We can start collecting data in any way you want from the point you request it, and we start collecting forward. I can only present to you what data we've been collecting in the past that we've been collecting. I can't go back and reconstruct.
So this would be one of the focus points under code enforcement. If we want to, as a council, start tabulating that could be.
I'm sorry, we might have it in much greater detail than you even want to get into the weeds to, or we might have it less so. So it's really a matter of, I'd suggest I can bring forward the data we have, and if you're interested in examining that, then you can see whether that drills you down to where you want to drill, whether you want to see greater specificity, or you want to see you don't need it quite as detailed. Again, like with everything else, if we're going to be tabulating a greater detail of data, again, that takes more resources. We're pretty stretched.
Okay. Councilmember Mosby?
I think if we're trying to shotgun code enforcement, I think it might be easy to identify, and of course, to see what data pool is sitting out there for us to draw on. But if hypothetically it comes back that we could draw out the top 10 codes that are being violated, maybe we could start targeting at those. It might be a good way to start targeting and being proactive ourselves and identifying what the codes are being violated. And again, like I said, it just is a simple thing. I don't know how many chicken tickets have been written, but what I'm finding out is people don't really know that you can't even have chickens. So whatever, just using that as an example. But if we can find out what they are, maybe we can help the public realize what the code is, and maybe the public can come here and say, hey, maybe we need to modify that code, get up to date, or get proactive and identify and advertise what the code is.
Yeah. And I don't know if we've ever issued a citation for chickens. I've never heard of us issuing one, but we may have in the past. Roosters are different than chickens, though. Yeah, okay. City Administrator.
Yeah. And I apologize, Mayor, I've been trying to keep track for as long as my light's been on to respond to a few of these things, so sorry if it seems like I'm piling up on a few things, but we've moved a lot of ground here. First of all, obviously, just from the discussion, there are varying views on how you'd want to see changes. I've heard both a member say, Mr. Starbuck say, he wants to see a more proactive approach. Those were his words. And I heard that we're too proactive from Mr. Mosby. So obviously, we need to work out, we can't be wrong in both directions. So something's, this is going to have to get talked through, and we need to have a shared understanding of what is it, how we want to move forward. Mr. Starbuck brought up that poor neighborhoods seem to be targeted. The matter of the fact is, in this community and many other communities, the code enforcement violations tend to be in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. Fact of life. We can, as Mr. Starbuck suggested, though, have our solutions be not merely citation, forcing, and fines, but also have supportive programs that can help people. Here's some resources to help you repair, to paint, to mend, to do what you need to do. And generally, people are appreciative and receptive to those sorts of things. It does require that we're going to prioritize that within some budget dollars, but we can do that. There are solutions. Mr. Starbuck highlighted the neighbor versus neighbor thing. Again, this is something that's not unique to Lompoc at all. It goes on all over the place, and trust me, the staff does not like becoming what I see as the pawn in a battle that's going on across the fence between two neighbors, and we merely get pulled in to be another piece of ammunition in this war that really doesn't have anything to do with code enforcement. They're looking for every Achilles heel with their enemy, and they find one within code enforcement issues. So it's not unique here. It places us in a difficult situation, because if something's brought to our attention, then we are bound. You had me and other people take an oath that we're going to enforce the laws, and so we take our oath with sincerity, and we try to carry that out as best we can. I'm not sure, and I don't know of any other solutions out there in the world just yet of how we resolve that particular issue. But it is fair to say that we have set up our system to be reactive based on reporting, and less so that we're intentionally going around and doing our own patrols to find things and point them out. We generally are a report-based reaction, and if we want to change the way we approach that, we can. The observation the mayor had about anonymous reporting, we don't necessarily have to require it being anonymous to us. In fact, we usually don't react on things that are outright anonymous. They may be known to us, but we hold that confidential to the public. And that, obviously, one of the reasons is because of reprisals that can go on, even recognizing maybe the reporting itself is in reprisal to something else that's non-code enforcement related. But to guard against that, that's why we just come out and we act, and we don't out who the reporting party was. So it's not anonymous to the process, so there's still accountability to someone who's making the report, because we don't want to be set on rabbit trails. But on the other hand, again, we're still obligated to enforce what's there. Storage sheds, I think we talked about that. I know there's the concern, but again, that's state building code, and if it's at the property line, it's not supposed to be there. These are the sorts of things where personally I start getting confused, if not frustrated, because I don't know how to make that okay. You're not supposed to do it. If it's there and we see it, we're supposed to cite it and have the property owner abate it. If there's a different approach, I don't know how that gets done at the local level. But I'm certainly open and receptive to what those suggestions might be. And I think we talked about the list, so I think I'm caught up to the present now. Sorry it takes so much time.
I'm going to hopefully summarize for the council, but please, if I misspeak, any one of you step in. I think what I'm hearing from the council is we would like to see some of the staff come back to us what the majority or the largest offenses are. So, for instance, we use chickens. If we're citing 99 out of 100 for chickens, let's take a look at that. We really need to do that. So come back to us with whatever we have, the largest violations. Let us take a look at those. If they are in fact codes that we cannot change or can't do anything about, if they're building and safety codes, I don't think we're going to go ahead and change it. But if it's something we have the ability to change, then the council can look at those. And then if based on that, do we want to possibly look at all codes as a council? Is that what I'm hearing? Oh, yeah. Okay, so then we'll take a look at all codes as a council. So direction to staff is give us a list of the major violations over the past year, categorized or whatever you can, and then we want to take a look at all codes.
And I think that's an excellent suggestion and idea, because I'm recognizing we do have some things that are outdated. And I want to highlight, because I think it's a great point, and I know it's been brought up before, but that Member Starbuck brought up about this idea, like, for instance, about the easements. It is important that we preserve our rights and entitlements as a city within our rights of way and easements. However, We don't need, we particularly here locally have some that extend beyond our absolute need and do create these situations where, as you pointed out, if we are strict in our interpretation and application of these things, it would chew up a great portion of someone's otherwise privately owned and utilized property. And to the extent, I think you and I had a discussion at one time, for instance, that some of these things were probably written back in the 1860s when we were trying to give enough turnaround room for a six-mule team to be able to turn around with the wagon, and somehow it stayed in place even though we got rack and pinion steering now. So, we in those sorts of cases, we want to preserve enough turnaround so that a fire truck can go in and be able to negotiate without having to do a 4 or 5 point turn, but we don't need beyond that. So those are good examples of where we can definitely go through and do some improvements and do some cleanups. I think it's important for us to protect the footprints we need to, and it's equally as important for us to free up these footprints that we really don't consider quite as critical. And I would say further, not just the sorts of, we not only need to do the code revisit for the sorts of things we're talking about here that involve our citizens directly, we have some other things just with the governance and operations of the city that we can stand to update and renew. So I really do appreciate that direction, and we'll look forward to bringing that to you. I'm sure the city attorney is going to be involved in that as well. Sure.
Councilmember Humdahl.
Yeah, one quick, I agree with everything you said. The one thing is about, go back to the chickens. I don't know when they took chickens out of the city, because in the early years, chicken was there because 4-H and FFA kids had chickens in the backyard. You could not have a rooster, but you had chickens. And so I don't know when that law changed. That's the interesting thing, because everybody kid in town in the 50s and 60s and 70s had chickens if they wanted them.
Thank you. Anyone else on code enforcement?
I have one more thing, too. I wanted to address, thank you. Patrick, with code enforcement, I've taken a look at the existing the codes right now. I just think basically where we're lacking is maybe a standardization of how the approach is happening, whether it applies to everyone equally, and if it's eyesores, if it's health and safety, and we have graffiti. We just need to know how that's going to be handled so that we can relay that information to our people out there, the residents of Lompoc, so they can feel like when it's applied not because of a vindictive neighbor or because you don't like their house, you don't like their color, as far as the color of the house and stuff. But, I think that's basically all I think we're looking for right now.
And I appreciate that direction, and that summation suggests a movement toward proactive rather than reactive. In other words, if we're going to get away from this neighbor versus neighbor, the way you do that is you identify that you're going to need some additional code enforcement resources so that we can be ahead of the game a little in identifying those areas and not making it just report based. So I appreciate that. On the graffiti portion, by the way, I did want to say, while we're not out in full force, we don't have all 400 employees necessarily looking for things like sheds that are on the property line or things. A couple of weeks ago, we did get together all the departments, and as it relates to graffiti, recognizing some issues that were going on, we did mobilize my direction to each of the department heads, and they in turn passed along to their crews, was for us to be reporting oriented, that all the eyes that we and ears and mouths that we have out in the field in our public works and solid waste and water and sewer and electric and code enforcement, everybody that's just out in the field in the course that they're driving around and walking around, is to make it a point to look for those things. It's easy for us to be focused on, just get hyper-focused on the job we have to do. If I'm out, looking to check on, sewer manhole covers and to do vacuuming out, it's easy for me to get focused on getting to the next sewer manhole and not taking in the neighborhood and looking around and seeing, wow, is there a stop sign that's marked up or something like that? So that's what we're doing. We're heightening the awareness. We're telling all the crews that the expectation is, as they're out and about, to make these reports. And we also found some deficiencies in our process into how that information then, not only that we're gathering the information, but how it gets to the person that needs to get out and do the painting. Just one example was we discovered we had 3 different phone numbers that were the graffiti hotline, and one of them was disconnected, and the other 2 went different places that may or may not get answered within the time frame that we expect things to be. So we got those things fixed, and we're rolling forward, and it'll be a continuing operation. So on that one point with graffiti identification and reaction, we are doing an all hands push to make sure we address those things. And by the way, it wasn't just it included even with our police and fire crews out and about and helping to be our eyes and ears. So we've got a lot of the 400 that spend their time out circulating in the community, and graffiti's become one of their priorities. They're not just responding or doing their primary job. They're doing this additional duty as well.
Thank you, Mr. Weinmiller, because that is exactly what I was talking about when I'm saying we've got all these workers out there. Reporting graffiti is exactly a good example of what I meant by that. And I'm hoping that the 5 of us would do the same thing if we're out there. We'd be reporting it. Councilmember Vega.
I do have one more comment there. Thank you, Patrick. The comment earlier about our gateways to our city, I would encourage that if we're going to move forward with any kind of code enforcement, that we make sure that the city's also walking the walk. Because what I would say is, if you're going to go into a neighborhood and the city needs to relook and take a look at some of their own properties, I'm not being specific about anything, but walk the walk. If we're going to do it, let's make sure that the city properties are maintained, and the gateways to the city, that anything the city might have control of are maintained, so that someone can't think that there's some hypocrisy going on. Okay, we have to lead by example. Okay.
Very fair. I think that's good commentary, and we're working toward that definitely. And I did want to give thanks for the reminder. I appreciate Ms. Ostini raising that issue, and wanted to throw in the additional plug. She had mentioned the church groups that are coming together to help in terms of one of the entrance points and helping to beautify that. They're having a service day on April 25th, so just about a month out. The particular first place that they're looking at on working at is as you're coming in, kind of as you get in front of the airport, to clean that up and make it, have a much better, bigger pop and everything. We've got good cooperation coming from Caltrans and our own crews, Cotty, and in terms of his organization of the project, and then just a lot of different hands that are helping out. So for anybody out there in the community that would like to participate in that particular day, we'd love to have you out there on the April 25th, and there'll be information on the website available to help people toward that time. But thanks, and we are trying to clean our own act up as well. Thanks.
Okay, before we move on to the next area, I'd like to invite the public to comment anything on code enforcement before we move on to the next item. Set them for 3 minutes.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, I'm Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. One of the things that I was kind of shocked to hear the other day at a council meeting was that code enforcement was paid out of community development block grants, which the acronym that probably most of you are familiar with is CDBG. And I was kind of a little taken back, because CDBG monies are intended for low and moderate income families. And code enforcement, as you have it now, is very punitive. I think rather than enhance the living environments for the people in many of these neighborhoods, it's actually punitive financially and creates hardship. And so if you're serious about code enforcement, I think that you need to reconsider the sources of funding, and you really need to allocate monies that are set aside, which there are very little for low and moderate income households, to be set aside help them and not to provide further financial burden to them. That would be the great place where Mr. Wallmeller indicated where you can have an assistance program similar to your rehab, where rather than using the CDBG funding strictly for paying a code enforcement officer, I think what I looked it up after I heard it on the council, was approximately $101,000 that was being used to fund that position rather than from the general fund. I think that $101,000 would go a lot further if you were to help seniors, disabled people, people that are under financial hardship, buy the paint, maybe have some way to help them rather than just punish them. Some things to you and I may seem as minor, but to a family who cannot barely pay their utilities, which we're well aware of that issue, you know, if you're not going to get people to pay utilities, are you going to get people to fix code enforcement things when there's financial hardships? So let's try to be a little bit more genuine and use the money that's set aside for these low and moderate income households for what it was intended, to enhance and not punish. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. John Lynn, Lompoc resident. If you will recall, those of you who are on the council and those of you who attended frequently, this began as a nuisance code enforcement program. And the council was very specific with regard to what we were going to enforce. But then after City Administrator Barcelona left us, it kind of widened out. And the answer given was, well, if I go out and look and respond to this complaint that somebody's made and I see something next door, then I have to go take care of that. And then if I'm next door and I see something next door, I have to take care of that. And what we ended up with is a lot of enforcement actions that were begun as a result of one anonymous complaint. Now, personally, having now lived through the anonymous complaint portion and had a conversation with our county supervisor a while back with an organization he was part of, when they stopped being anonymous, they stopped being silly. So I would recommend to you, number one, that you end anonymous complaints, except perhaps for health and safety items. Number two, I've heard several of you say the word easement with regard to the 18 feet in people's front yards. That is not, in fact, an easement. That is city property. The streets that the city owns in Lompoc are 80 feet wide. So there would have to be an action taken by the council to return some, or to transfer some of that property to the property owners of the adjacent parcels. So there are some issues that need to be addressed individually. Number one, permitted structures that were permitted long ago, but the records no longer exist. Number two, the conversion of garages, which was allowed by the city in some cases with and without permits. I recall a conversation where I was told, yeah, just go ahead, it doesn't matter. I didn't happen to do it, but that was the conversation. Number three would be sheds. We certainly have the ability to change the rule that says a shed has to be 5 feet from an alley fence. The bulk of the sheds are on alley fences because of the bulk of the parcels have alleys. And that would solve probably 75% of our shed problems. The next one is chickens. And those of you who have been on the council recall that we instructed the staff to take a chicken ordinance created by a citizens committee and move it through the planning commission, but that hasn't happened yet. And the one that nobody's talking about, which we issue tons of citations for, is illegal dumping in alleys. And we've gone through a number of proposals. I've made several, and the problem hasn't been solved, and people are cited constantly. We have someone in the trash department whose principal job is to go around and cite people for dumping, generally not by their tenants, but by someone that came through. So those are some core items that need to be addressed before we go out and begin another round of code enforcement. And if we do that, we'll probably eliminate 70 or 80% of the problems, and we'll certainly make a lot of people happier. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Hi, good evening, council members. My name is Mary Ellen Brooks. I don't live in the city, but I rent in the city. I'm affiliated with the group, and we now have a rental in the city. I want to talk about libraries eventually, but let me first, I would like to bring something to attention. I think it would fit under the code enforcement. It's actually a zoning issue, and that's sign regulations. Several years ago, when I was on the Planning Commission of the county, we had to deal with signs, and I happened to look at the city code for sign regulations, and I was really very surprised to see what I found. I'm reading here from Title 17, your zoning ordinance. These are the signs that are prohibited, according to your present ordinance. Moving or rotating signs. Any sign that moves or rotates are prohibited, except barber poles. Well, I think you've noticed a proliferation of what they call feather signs in the city. I know in other communities, in the county, in other municipalities, feather signs are not allowed. They are prohibited. And I would say, according to your own standards here, those feather signs are not legal. I was very surprised, and I know it was probably from not knowing what the ordinance was, but the recent T-bid expenditures of more feather signs in front of the motels. I was really surprised to see that, because here's the ordinance right here that says feather signs are prohibited. Off-premises advertising. There's somebody named Jen who's selling or buying houses, and those have been put up in different places, not only in the city, but in the county. Those kinds of signs are prohibited. Portable signs, sandwich signs. Sandwich signs, it says right here, they are A-frame or sandwich board signs. They're prohibited. Also, signs that interfere with traffic safety. Many signs are now in what I think is the Caltrans easements along Ocean and on H Street. So anything between the sidewalk and the road itself really shouldn't have signs. And I'm not quite sure about plastic banner signs. I know in Santa Maria, they went through a huge kind of close examination of the signs in their city. And things like sandwich board signs, plastic signs, are not, in most municipalities, are not allowed. Now, I did not find that here, so I'm not going to say anything about it, but I would hope as you do this that you look a little closely at your sign regulations and that you might include that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. As a matter of fact, the city administrator and I had this exact conversation this afternoon, and thank you for bringing it up, because I forgot to bring it up. I'd like to add to the code enforcement a review of our sign ordinance, which many councils ago, we had a committee set up. They reviewed our sign ordinance. They came back with some recommendations, and it's sitting on the shelf someplace. So yes, thank you. Review our sign ordinance, and there's things we can do with the feather flags. There's a purpose for them. Just a suggestion. I'm not saying we're going to do this, but like if someone's having a grand opening for a business, maybe we'd allow, by permit for a weekend or something like that, we'd allow it. I'm not saying that we're going to, just something we could consider that in the future. So, yes, sir. But we're gonna bring back the sign, take a look at the sign ordinance. Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about the sign with the feather signs and stuff. I think they're, I don't have any, I don't use any, but I see people that have them. I think it's a good way to advertise. I think that they're trying to put their product out there and show people they're still in business or doing something. I think it's a good thing, especially like you say, for grand openings and stuff like that. But if they're not obstructing, if they're high enough and not obstructing anything on the sidewalks, they're hooked to the building properly, and they're done right, I don't see any problem with the feather sign. It's a way to advertise. We can't have everything shut down and have a little sign on your front door open. Looks nice. The old signs that we have, like on my older building, the neon stuff, I don't even know if you can do that anymore, can you? But yeah, and why not? They're great looking. The one at the hotel, motel, or whatever it is next to me, they're just great looking signs. People love them. They're part of our history. But I got too much on signs there, I guess. God, I really went off. We, on a code enforcement, I think that we need the neighborhoods to stay clean and to do what's right, and I agree with all of that. If you have a garage, it should be used as a garage. It shouldn't be used as a living area unless it's legally done that way. I think that you should probably one of these days come out with the most, I guess, abused code enforcements and maybe run it in the Sunday paper or something and show people what they can't do. A lot of people maybe don't know they're breaking the law. I think maybe if you come down with one that shows what they're doing, it might help before you have to go out and spend a lot of money. People want to do things right. You know, sometimes they just are ignorant to the law and don't know what's going on. But I think that would help a lot. You just come out with the most abused ones and put it in the paper and say these are some of the things that you can't do in this town. But I think if we attack some of these problems more on a gentle basis instead of beating it down their throat, maybe some people will abide by it. As far as taking care of low-income families, we're already doing too much of that. We can't go around painting people's houses and stuff, you know. We can't do that. I mean, that's totally out of the question as far as I'm concerned. You just don't do that kind of stuff. It's, they need to take out a loan or do something. If they're that low income, then maybe it's better to sell and go do something else. But the city can't go around and do all the work for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, anyone else? Okay, just so you know, so you can sort of plan, we'll do this after each one. We're still going to cover parks, we're going to cover infrastructure, so we'll allow public comment after we discuss it. And as far as the libraries, we still have coming up, we have oral communications towards the end of the meeting, so you'll be able to discuss libraries, whatever you want to discuss at that time. Okay, if it's okay with the council, can we discuss parks a little bit? Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, if somebody has something on here that wasn't discussed last, but I have a lot of things that are not on this list. Or not a lot. I have a couple of things that are not on this list that I wanted to discuss.
Okay. I kind of mentioned that earlier, but we can certainly bring it up right now. Go ahead.
The first thing, and I think that this would behoove us as a council, I really don't think we need to open it up to discussion, but I would like to direct staff that sometime we receive a report on Frick Springs. Grew up here, Councilmember Holmdahl lived up there, but none of us really know anything about Frick Springs. All of a sudden, I have a lot of people coming down asking me, going, I've got this letter from the city asking me to provide information. This was done under their parents or grandparents. They don't have it. We're charging people that live up here half again as much as we do. There's a lot of mystery surrounds Frick Springs, and I think it's time to pull the covers back and look at what happens.
Councilman Humdahl.
You know, you've got a good point there, but you got to realize the only ones using water out of Frick Springs is from our old place down from the city reservoir. But that up to the top does.
Now that's a known, but now what about the others that are being charged half again as much? What does it cost us in staffing to operate Frick Springs? Is it something we want to stay with? You know, there are so many variables. I just think that it's time that we, like I said, pull the covers back, take a look, and find out what the heck is going on.
Well, you got to remember, they took the water away from us originally, so they guaranteed that they'd have water for those sites.
Councilmember, I'll get to you in a second, Councilmember. Councilman Starbuck, since that's probably, it could be considered some form of priority, but maybe you could bring it up under council request to have it brought back to the council.
Well, I thought we were doing a workshop and not a priority, so.
Of course we are, but I don't know where we want to put that on the priorities. So if we could certainly put it under council request. We could bring it, have it brought back, a discussion on that. Is that what?
We could do that, absolutely. I'll do it then.
Okay, I mean, good, okay. Councilman Mosby.
Yeah, Frick Springs, that was a question I asked as a utility commissioner, and I just got a lot of eye rolls. And when I asked certain questions about, like you're mentioning here, the 1.5 times rates, and how much money that we lost because there was a number not being charged and it was supposed to be charged. And again, I got a lot of eye rolls. So it could actually fall under economic development. if the cities, if there's an alternative that's out there, finding out how much Frick Springs does cost. And that was one of my questions. How much does it truly cost? Because we're running it as. And there were grant opportunities and are grant opportunities out there to help communities clean up, let's not call it a mess, but clean up old arcane projects like this. Meaning running booster pumps, running new lines, and putting them on city water. I mean, as right now, as you know, Councilmember Holmdahl, several of the springs at Frick Springs, I don't think they're running right now. But it is. Are they all? I was told there was a couple of them weren't.
Well, there may be, but most of them all are still running up above.
I was told due to the drought conditions, but anyhow, it's.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I got to call a point of order. We're operating without the city attorney, and so I'm having to act in that capacity. And I think you're off of the topic, and I hear what you're suggesting. It may be economic development. I think we'd be hard pressed there. So I do suggest there's a place later on in the agenda to be able to have other council requests. And I think at best, if you want to talk about Frick Springs, let's bring it up then, and that'll work out well. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else before we move on to, is Parks okay if we move on to Parks right now? Is that okay with everyone? Sure. Okay. Who'd like to start with focus points or anything about Parks? Well, then, Councilmember Mosby, go ahead.
Where do you start with Parks? Really, you want to fix a couple big things or a bunch of little things? I know there's
it's a workshop, so this is.
In my eyes, two of the biggest items that are out there, of course, one of our parks that brings a lot of people is the Riverbend soccer fields. And I know that there's a huge gopher hole problem out there. And unfortunately, we could probably absorb a lot of the money to do that. And likewise at Ryan Park, we know there's an issue. We've had the dog shows out there, and people with their dogs have had issues with the holes out there, and we've had people come to the meeting. So I don't know. And then you can go down the long list of everything from bathrooms to tennis courts and putting lights here. So I don't know. Maybe you can enlighten something for us.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great topic and certainly one at my heart. And I think, without trying to get away from the discussion here at all, I encourage the discussion. But I think this is an area where we could probably spend, a dedicated time just focusing on what our strategic plan is going to be with parks. And I do believe we need one. The couple things you mentioned there. I would first say that the reason I think the parks are important, sort of like we talked about in the last workshop, is because it's one of those things that, in terms of if people are coming from outside of the area to come here and spend some time here and hopefully spend some dollars here, there are some, things that attract that we, the city, don't operate, the wine ghetto and the like. But of those things we do operate, the parks are definitely going to be the types of things that are going to be that magnet that helps to put heads in beds and spend restaurant meals and the like. And so I think we do have to be strategic and intentional, and it isn't going to be cheap. A couple things you mentioned, for instance, Ryan Park is the place that gets the most visitation right now. And that place needs an entire do-over. It's not just a facelift. Every component of that park needs to be addressed, and probably from the base up. We do need gopher wire and to re-level. We need to take out the walking track that's there and put something in that's intentional. We have wiring to do there if we want to set up for booths and to be able to have it be purposeful and meaningful for those types of events. We need to change the wind screening that's going on around there. The parking lot is absolutely lost. You're not going to be able to cover that. We need to rebuild that from the base up. The tennis courts right now, if there's still a need and desire for tennis courts, we either need to redo and resurface those or intend ourselves to build something new and build it somewhere else so we can create a wider connectivity that that tennis court right now sort of sections it off and separates the rest of the park from the football portion back there. And there's a number of things we could do for the football field and other ball fields out there. The tot lots, there's not a piece of it that we can't do better, and don't even get me started on the stage and the inadequacies there. So we've got so much top to bottom, and we are talking a handful of millions just to overdo that. We're talking a real big number just to do the gopher wire out at the soccer fields. However, the good news is that's going to take care of most of your issues out there if we go in and we do that, whereas at Ryan we've got a lot of other issues to address. And then from there we need to be, as we talked about before, be strategic. Do we really need all the parks that we have as they're situated around about, or are we better being more intentional about being regional or area-wide in our placement, making more area parks and not having splintered small neighborhood parks that are the most expensive to maintain and offer the least amount of amenities in a location. So I'm not saying, I'm saying it to encourage, not discourage the discussion on parks, but I would say all that we have to do to solve those issues is going to take more than the discussion we have tonight. We really need a strategic plan on there. The good news is we can fix that. It's just that it takes a lot of money, but we can fix it.
Well, thank you, and that's why parks are one of the 5 priorities, because we know there is so much need for it. Parks we could have put it under economic development, because it really is, could be a major portion of our economic development. We know what we can do is at JM Park, we redid the ball field there. We did a good job on that. That ball field looks nice, it stays nice, we put gopher wire underneath there. Maybe looking at a few things we could have done a little bit better there, but it's a beautiful ball field, so we can do a good job. I hope I don't embarrass Councilmember Starbuck, but I know that Councilmember Starbuck and a citizen I'm not going to call it a strategic plan, but you looked at Ryan Park and came up with a possible game plan for it. And I think I'd like to invite Councilmember Starbuck and that citizen to maybe do a presentation to the City Council one night on what we could possibly do with Ryan Park. Ryan Park is our flagship for parks. Economic development, we have the Flower Festival there, the dog show, spring arts. We have so many of the events there, as well as the community uses it for everything. The car show, the Cinco de Mayo. Many events are held there, so it is a flagship. We need to really invest some money in that. Gopher wire underneath the soccer fields, you're right, that's probably will fix the majority of our problems out there. I think we still have to do some with the parking lot out there, but that's the majority of it. So maybe under parks, put down a strategic plan. That's where we start. We have so many issues with our parks, we can't sort of shotgun it. Let's have a plan. Maybe this plan is a couple years, 5 years. I'm not sure what it's going to take us, but we absolutely have to have a plan to improve our parks, get them back to where we can use them.
And just as a heads up, not to get too much in the weeds, but I think we recognize less so with the soccer fields, more so with a place like Ryan Park, we're going to have to prepare ourselves that we need to shut the place down for a period of time to be able to do the overhaul that needs to be done. And so we're going to have to do some reprogramming and repositioning for a time. And it also means the timing of when we do things is going to be important, because we want to try to come on the heels of the string of important events that goes on. Just one of the other challenges, by the way, we have at parks, but particularly at Ryan Park, I know in talking with our parks maintenance folks, is the way that we also just carry out our programming. We get to a certain point in the late spring and leading in the summer that we are basically doing big event, big event, big event without much spacing. And a given big event is hard on the park. And then we don't have the recovery time, for instance, to get the turf back in shape before the next event is there. That's just one other area we eventually have to look at. When we've done everything we have to do on the capital side, we have to be a little more intentional on how we schedule the events as well.
And for those of you that are wondering, yes, the arch will be part of that plan. So, Councilmember Wagner.
Yes, having grown up here all my life, the kids that are in sports, and the families that they're stay-at-home moms or just anybody else that just wants to relax or get away from their busy day. The parks are key to giving first impressions or last impressions to anybody that might come into the city. So I think with the soccer fields, with sports, we need to look at any restrictions that might prevent anybody from doing anything that's any fun in the parks. Okay, somebody told me that maybe, can you fly a kite out there? What can you do? What can't you do? Okay, maybe we need to put some signage up there to say, hey, maybe the city's taking a new lease on life out here, and maybe we have come up to the 21st century and we've seen, hey, with technology and everything, take a look at who else is modernized. Maybe they built a sound stage. Maybe they've done something different. Maybe it's just not the same old handball courts. Maybe it's something else where we have some ginchy-looking barbecue pits or something, okay, that's geared toward keeping families together a little more cohesively, and also where they can do some recreation at the same time, and then also lighting at night, okay? Because you know what? If we want Lompoc to be a destination after 5 o'clock, those parks should be included.
That's a great point, too, and I didn't list it when I was mentioning Ryan Park, but that's a great example. If you can picture all the things we're talking about and having a nice area just for walking, leisurely use, passive use, we have to give people have the feeling of safety and comfort there, which means the lighting has to be good. The good thing is with the lighting technology that's available now, with the use of LEDs and the like, you can do some great things to really make those areas much more usable in the evening. So great addition. Thanks.
Councilmember Homdahl.
Yeah, everything's been excellent talking about our parks, and I think that's why we need to have just one meeting strictly on that, but before that, some idea on what cost of each one of those items are going to have to be done, so we can lay out a priority over the next few years, or the next year, or whatever it is, of what's going to get done first, what has to be done. And I think everybody's had some good ideas, but if we do it that way in a meeting, then we can lay out a priority side. This is the direction we're going to go for the next 10 years or whatever.
Councilmember Vega.
I'd like to point out that when I mentioned the lighting for the parks for the city, and the main city parks, or if we have one or two parks that we wish to showcase, those are the ones really what I meant, not about lighting all the parks up at night, but basically to showcase Lompoc. If we had parks over there, we have our little park over there that they call, whatever they call that park over there, right, on Old Town. Little things that we can do, whether you got to light up the trees, I do think it's an excellent point that with our signage and our neon or whatever that we do or don't, we need to look at those ordinances again to see what we can do to attract, because I don't think we're doing enough.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got some focus points now under parks. Anyone want to add anything we want to look at? We're going to have public comment then next. So these are the things we will focus on in parks, but we all know that parks in general are a main priority for us. Okay, public comment. Anyone on parks?
Nick Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. Yeah, I have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old high school daughters, and I've traveled throughout the entire state, soccer tournaments, softball tournaments, sporting events for other family members. And unfortunately, I have to say, in every specific area, whether it be soccer, softball, any of the sports that I've attended, Lompoc park infrastructure by far is at the bottom of the list. And I'm really, I've been trumping for a long time that, as many of you stated, that parks can be a very important part of economic development. All you need to do is the next major soccer tournament, go out to Riverbend Park and look at how many families are there. And, I hear all of you so often talk about this first impression, and you go in with code enforcement because of the way the town looks, and yet you've let our parks just get horrible. So, next time you're thinking about imposing on the families the code enforcement, put a little imposition upon yourselves for the maintenance of our parks. Parks are very vital to the community. They're used by all the youth activities in this community. And I'm a firm believer that these activities save a lot of these kids. If we keep a kid in a park playing a sport, he's not running on the streets writing up graffiti on the walls. You know, if we keep a kid, you know, on a sports team in a park, he's learning discipline, he's learning teamwork, he's learning a lot, or she's learning a lot. So I think we need to refocus, and I don't know how necessarily go about doing that, because I know, as our city administrator stated, it takes money. I don't know what law governs impact fees, but if we have any control on the ordinance, maybe we need to rewrite the ordinance so that the impact fees could be used for maintenance. Again, I'm naive in that standpoint, but we need to do something, or maybe even allow more sponsorships from private enterprise. But we need to do something to bring the parks up to par with our surrounding communities, or we just need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. And that is exactly why we've set parks as a major priority. I don't know in the history of this city if parks have ever been on the top priority list. So thank you for your comments.
So I want to offer a suggestion to you.
And your name is?
Sorry, same old John Lynn. You know, we have three sources of revenue to work on parks right now. We have some bond revenue left from the community center and pool, which can be used on the parks within the redevelopment area. We have impact fees, which can be used not for maintenance, but to provide an amenity that doesn't currently exist. So if a park, for instance, is not handicap accessible, those impact fees could be used to provide that for a restroom or a walking path. But the other really big one that you're not considering is what the community brings to it. So if you let your mind wander around Lompoc for just a moment, virtually everything in every park was built by the community, not by the city, other than the aquatic center. Obviously, that was purpose-built. So just earlier today, I asked the question of the Hill Ride folks with regard to the BMX parks. We're trying to establish a value. What it would cost to build that park if it was done strictly with city funds, and not including going for prevailing wage, it was about $1.1 million. There was $360,000 in dirt brought in at no cost, as an example. So that park generated about $1.1 million for the city in value. I don't really know how much it would have cost to build the soccer fields, but I'm sure it would have been in that same vicinity. I mean, there was less work, but it's a much larger area. The dog park was worth about $350,000. The motorsports park that we're working our way through now is worth about $3.5 million. And there are groups who have expressed an interest in refurbishing a park, not painting it, but literally starting over and making something out of it. But we've never found a way within the city to allow that to happen because of all of the various constraints that we find ourselves within. So one of the things you should consider, number one, of the three funding sources that we have available, and obviously the general fund is at the end of that list. And number two is providing the opportunity for groups to come in and do these kinds of things, because I think that's $3, $4, $5, $6, about $7 million that's been provided over the last maybe 10 years now, roughly, with the soccer field. Thank you.
Thank you. And one that you missed, it may be small, but a lot of people enjoy it, is the dog park. So that's another one. Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Hi. You know, it may be a good idea.
What's your
if
name,
we're
Ray?
gonna do something like
What's
that.
your name, Ray?
Pardon?
What's your name, Ray?
Bob. Ray Leslie.
Okay, thanks.
Is to maybe hold some concerts over there and do some stuff like that. Maybe the community would like to get involved in some things, you know, and do something about the park, you know, and to start raising money for it. Start something off where people think about it and they get more excited about it and they see something being done, and actually they even feel better about it when the city spends some money on it, you know. But to do something like that might be interesting for everybody, you know, and start out with maybe some nice tennis courts or something, find out how many people use it, what's going on. I don't know what's happening over there, but the most used of all of it, start with that and show them that you mean business. And go in there and maybe you could move some stuff around and get more room or do something. But, you know, all of these places up north that I used to attend, you know, some of the old drive-in theaters, they turned into big concert halls, and I mean, they made millions of dollars. You know, they were so just packed every weekend. But they were in a rural area where didn't bother people. So we have to be careful with sound and all of that down here, so it's going to make a difference. But, I think we could come up with some community input and stuff and maybe get something done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on now to discussion on infrastructure. Who would like to begin discussion on infrastructure? Okay, I will start. I think, well, if you've been paying attention to any of our council meetings, many times we've brought up the conditions of our roads, our underground water, sewer lines, and if during the last election, Measure M was on the ballot. It failed, but a lot of people paid attention to it. The county infrastructure isn't in as bad shape, in some cases worse than our city infrastructure. Our roads, county roads, are just slightly worse than our roads, but both of our roads are below the standard for roads. So I think it's one of the focus points I'd like to put us on is bring the council up to date on, again, where the condition of our infrastructure is. Our roads, our underground sewer and water lines, the cost of replacing a road once it's deteriorated. I think we were told that it's something like 5 times the cost of maintaining it on a regular basis. The same thing with repairing a sewer line before it ruptures, a water line before it ruptures, is 5, 7, 10 times more expensive to replace it than to maintain it. So infrastructure, I think we need to bring back to the council as conditions that we have, and possibly, the time frame for getting us back up there is beyond our lifetimes, but we have to start now in putting some money towards our infrastructure. So that's where I'd like to see us focus on, getting an idea of where we are today, and then, again, having a plan as to what we can do to either maintain our level, which was what our Measure M was, just maintain so it doesn't continue to deteriorate, or a plan to maintain and over a period of many, many years it's going to take to get us back up to where we should be. So that's one of the focus points I'd like to see us put onto infrastructure. Same thing, now that's just the water lines, sewer lines, roads, but we're also talking about our buildings. We have to maintain our buildings. We have a huge investment. Mr. Leslie talked about property. Well, we also have we have a lot of property in the city, but we have a lot of infrastructure, buildings on there. We have to maintain our buildings as well. So again, an idea of what the conditions are of our buildings as well. So that's what I'd like to see. Councilmember Vega.
Yes, I'd like to see technology put under infrastructure so that we can upgrade all our existing, which I think we're moving toward that way, but I think that's part of infrastructure as far as the city's going. I think that I consider that part of infrastructure, but I think that if we don't get up to the 21st century again, we're going to be old school here, and again, we've had losses that we can't really account for, or they have had to be charged off, and we need to stop the bleed off of that. Also, any other buildings that are being underutilized that are costing the city money, it looks like we need to go back and revisit this and find out what's on the books that we're just paying for that's not bringing back any money to the city. And also any properties that, well, some of those are buildings, but also vacant properties, again, that can be utilized by the city or not, or can be marketed, which economic development would capitalize on that. We need to, since we have a new council here, we need to revisit that, look at the zoning map, get with planning, let's see what we have to sell, or else we won't know what we're over here marketing. Okay, so economic development we could probably all get together on this so we can move forward as far as infrastructure and how do we put the city back together again.
Spoken like a true realtor looking for something to sell. Councilmember Starbuck.
Okay, well, one of the items that I wanted to talk about was maybe looking at doing a more immediate update of our computer. Every issue we have, you can follow it back, and it goes to an archaic computer system. We have a system that's been in place since '86. We employ a whole bunch of IT people, and we're looking at going, I'm not sure if I'm right here, but probably in 2020 doing this. I personally think that's too far down the road if that's the case.
Yeah, I think that would be too far down the road. I can tell you we're internally we're driving this forward. We took our foot off the pedal for a little while because of some competing issues, but we're repressing the pedal down. This is one of our priorities. Even at that, I think an 18-month time period to get a new financial system online and starting to run parallel will be a very aggressive timeline. But those are the sorts of things we've started talking in terms of. So I don't think it's going to take till 2020, but it does take us more than 3 or 6 months because we've got so many different modules we have to make sure that work and serve the purposes of the different departments and missions and functions that we take. We also need to make sure it can talk with other systems that we have. Things like our emergency response areas and things like that. We've got to make sure we've got some intercommunication capabilities. We don't. So it's important that we are purposeful and we take the time to not to drag our feet, but to examine each of those areas and make sure our critical functions in each case are being addressed by what we collect. Now, one of the things to help us along and help speed this up is there are other agencies nearby, City of Santa Barbara as an example, who are going through that process right now. We know we can get some real life experience for free from what other people are experiencing in terms of the pluses and minuses of different systems that are being put in. Brad Wilkie, our finance director, is management services director, is very plugged in with other finance directors in the Central Coast area, and we have been mining information from them to help us speed along our process so we can shortcut and start focusing on those tools that we think are going to have the greatest upside. I don't know that I expressed it enough publicly, but I so appreciate how positively this council has responded to that need, because sometimes in some jurisdictions I tell you that not always will the policymaking body understand the critical nature of a finance system. It's normally not sexy to talk about, but it is vital in our achieving efficiencies and doing so many other things that we want to do, having a better job of recovering the revenues that are due to us, just giving better customer service and enabling the customers to see their actual accounts and uses and things like that. It helps in so many areas, and I really got to give kudos to this council and for the prior council for recognizing and valuing what that system can bring. So if I haven't said it publicly, I wanted to make sure I do it here.
I'd like to throw in here, thank you for that, Patrick, because when we did do these priorities, technology and computer only received 2 votes, so it didn't make the list. But tying it in with infrastructure at least should keep it, maybe we can make it infrastructure / technology here. That way it still is looked at every day by us.
I think it's pretty progressive thinking, that infrastructure, we're not, it is infrastructure, and it's not just the old pipelines and buildings that we used to think in terms of, particularly in today's technological age. It's a critical function.
And when we were doing the last workshop, that's exactly, I think, what several of us thought about, that it was considered infrastructure, but we could certainly, with the agreement with the council, we could say infrastructure / technology if it would put more of an emphasis on it. So if that's,
I think it would be recognized a lot more. It wouldn't be forgotten or cast off to the side.
Okay, and then
I'm okay with it, but I think it's okay the way it is because it's one of the priorities, you know?
It is, yeah. But we'll just for an emphasis on
We're
that.
kind of going up and down over tit for tat, but you know?
Then the other thing, Mr. Weimiller, and I have complete confidence that you're going to keep this online, but one of the things that you had mentioned 18 months, okay. If that's realistic,
I said that was aggressive.
aggressive, okay.
I don't want to be promising or leading 18 months. I'm saying we're going to run hard at that. If we do it in 24 or 30 months, I think it's still going to be a...
Okay, so then what I'd like to see, and this happened when we were building I think it was the Dewey Center, the community center, community senior center. It just seemed like it was taking forever and ever and ever until we asked the staff to come back on a quarterly basis, just give us an update. So because this is so important, this entire council and administration feels that this technology update is so important. I'd like to see, if I can get the agreement of the council, that we just get a quarterly update as to where we are in the progress of implementing this new system.
This sounds like a council request.
Well, yes, I will, your point taken, I will bring it under council request. Thank you. So, okay. Infrastructure, anything else? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman Vega.
I'd like to bring up, you know, under infrastructure, okay. Has anybody taken a look lately at lighting or anything that in regards to safety around our local schools at night? You know, I've driven around, you know, and we have some of these areas that are high density. I don't know when the last time someone looked at it or how the city addresses any lighting concerns for kids as far as safety coming home from sports at night that we might have as far as the back end of the high school, you know, on West Pine Avenue. It's just one thing, you know, we're looking out for our kids, and some of the areas are pretty dark sometimes, you know, after a sporting event, so I thought I'd at least mention it, you know. Maybe they can at least take a look at it, see if there's any concerns there.
Okay. Okay, public comment on infrastructure / technology.
Leslie.
We have people say in the microphone, so it's picked up on the cameras and for the record on the recording. Thanks.
Okay. Did I say it already? My name is Ray Leslie. Okay. I'll start doing that better. Is it true that you're not allowed to get contractors in here to do repaving and stuff to take care of the infrastructure, or does it have to be done by the crews from the road department?
No, we use contractors
For
as well.
patching and everything and doing all that?
Currently, we do any patching internally, but we're able to...
But if it's bad enough, you could get a contractor?
We could get a contractor.
Yeah, I was told that you weren't allowed to do that, because I had some people that were all set up, and I already had bids on some things just for the fun of it. Of a huge contractor that could come through and...
You're not able to go out on your own and just...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that for the city to contract to.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
I was told you couldn't do that. Yeah.
Not by me, you weren't.
Well, I thought it was pretty fishy myself, but anyway, there's some really good contractors out there that do paving and stuff on these highways and roads. That's all they do nowadays, because there's so much of it to go around and do, you know, and they can really fix something up and do it properly, where you're not going to have trouble down the road and just, in other words, Band-Aid it, you know, and not do that to it. So I think it'd be a good idea to maybe, if I even help and get some of these contractors to get a hold of you guys or something, or come down and just look it over and give me some prices on some stuff and give you an idea what it would cost. I'd be willing to do that, because we really need some work done on these roads, and I know we need to save money and do it. And if we could find an area the worst to start with and get a good contractor for a good price to come in and do it, and maybe keep him on board, just doing a little at a time and moving around town and try and get the whole city so it's decent again, even including our alleys. There's an alley behind my shop that's so bad a bike went down in it. And I called and talked to the other mayor and told him how serious it was. It's still not fixed today. It's so bad back there that you can't ride a bike down it if it has a narrower tire on it and Harleys and stuff. That's pretty pathetic when you own a bike shop and they can't even enter it by certain ways. All the alleys there are real bad, but that one's really bad. It might be worth taking a look at it and seeing if we could get somebody to at least fix that. So the shop is going to stay open. It'd be nice that nobody got hurt out there. But if there's anything I can do to help and talk to some of these contractors, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Anyone else?
John Lynn. You know, we've made a great stride with the city administrator's effort in converting our street lighting from sodium to LED. So we have some substantial cost savings over the long haul. But the next step that we need to do, and it's to Councilmember Vega's point, I actually wasn't going to say anything about infrastructure, but it struck me. You know, we have built our street lighting beginning in 1923 to date under a number of different specifications, if you will. So an area of A Street from Central to the edge of town comes to mind, where there are at least triple the number of street lights that I've seen anywhere else in town, even on H Street. And the other day, I took a chance to drive down the Z Street alley, where we had some problems, and you'll recall at the council meeting some time ago, we asked to have a street light put up. That is the only street light in the entire Z Street alley. And similarly, there are other alleys in town that do not have a light. There are blocks in town that do not have a mid-block light. And so I think we need to take a purposeful look at the positioning of all of our street lights, particularly in an area of a school where we have a higher risk, and then determine where we have too many and determine where we have not enough and make those changes. But it needs to be done by reviewing a map, and I'm sure the city staff is more than able to do it, and the council could then act on it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Vega, Councilmember Vega, would you like to make that one of the focus points, is review the lighting situation?
Yeah, I would like to, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, it's not only for the kids' safety. It's the kids' safety, but driving a motor vehicle is very difficult to see sometimes. You know, you don't want to have an accident. So I'm thinking anything we can do to help, at least take a look at it and review it.
Good. So we'll put that under focus point for infrastructure. Next public speaker.
Butch Browder, Lompoc citizen. This infrastructure is probably, in my mind, the most important thing you could be addressing. And it's going to be very serious how you address it. You can't just go out and start talking about the pipes under the ground or the wires overhead. What you need to do, in my opinion, is to think about what you're going to do before you do it and how you're going to do it. And one of the things you should do at the very outset of the evaluation period is to think about your computer system. Everything is being run by computers nowadays. And computers control how we do things. Not only control it, but manage it. There's three things that you need to address. One of them is the information system. Another is the management information system. And third, and probably not the end of the list, is the geodetic system. How you manage and control and keep track of all of these other systems. The government has done it very well at Vandenberg. All of the other big organizations, big government organizations, has gone to a more comprehensive management system through computers. And it's not something you can do just haphazardly. You're going to have to put a lot of thought into it. The city administrator and his staff is going to have to think about it very hard, and what has to be done to employ the computer capability to its best advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Browder, I may be the only person. You use the term geodetic?
I call it geodetic, but I think it's there may be another term for it.
Okay.
It's talking about, for instance, like the GIS system, so that and how it interacts. A good example is, for instance, see, we don't have, as he's pointed out and highlighting, and I haven't really spoken about it as much, we have some GIS layers, but we don't particularly have a robust GIS system as we speak. We got some great people that are able to do a lot with what we do have. But if you had a fully developed and robust GIS system, as an example, you'd be able to, like, let's say we're talking about infrastructure, you'd be able to click and point to, let's say, a section of water pipe and be able to come up with what dimension it is, what year it was built, what materials it's built out of. You'd have been accumulating all of your maintenance records that are in the financial system that also interact to a particular geo point, and be able to interact and describe what's going on there. So that's an example when you have those things layer in, and there's so much information can be used, and it's got practicality in operations with police, with fire, with public works, with public utilities. It's kind of, it becomes endless and expansive for the city's ability to not only manage its assets and better target where it needs to make its infrastructure investments, but it even helps guide us better in how we service our customers. So,
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wasn't familiar with that term, so thank you for the explanation. Okay, anything else on infrastructure? Okay, what I'd like to do is we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll finish the agenda, but we'll, if any council member wants to add any other issues, we can put it under focus points. I think we want to stick to the 5 priorities, but we can discuss anything else we want to get on there for direction to the city staff. So let's take a 5-minute break. Okay, if we can get everyone to return to your seats, we are going to resume the meeting. Okay, before we move on, do any council members have anything else we want to add to the list of on the priorities? Focus points, discussion areas? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to that. We're going to go to written communications. City Clerk, do we have any written communications? Oh, yeah. You know what? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
You going to read them all?
The clerk's office received a letter from the chair of the Economic Development Committee, Janelle Osborne. She asked me to read it. Dear Honorable Mayor, council members, city administrator, staff, and Lompoc residents, as chair of the Economic Development Committee, I, Janelle Osborne, am unable to attend tonight's meeting due to a family commitment. Steve Pepe is traveling to Northern California, or he would have been present. Other executive committee members are unavailable since the issue of our committee attendance was not an item placed on tonight's agenda, so that we could plan to attend. Instead, it was mentioned in Sunday's March 22nd Lompoc Record article regarding this workshop whose agenda has no defined items. It is disappointing that council would decide to discuss an issue regarding the EDC without first notifying the committee directly of its concerns. The EDC finds it disrespectful to the volunteers to utilize inflammatory comments in newspaper articles to express concerns rather than meeting with myself and members of the executive committee. Attending a committee meeting or notifying any of the members of this concern face-to-face. Attached is the Lompoc Record guest commentary printed today regarding our response to the recent newspaper articles on our committee attendance record. Here are a few additional points. EDC members are all at-large appointees, so each council member has 23 voices, not just 5. According to the committee handbook, we are charged with responsibilities that include advise City Council, act as channels of communication and information between city government, the general public, and special interest groups, and encourage broad participation. As a result of these responsibilities, we understand the EDC to be an apolitical committee who is to be the voice of the business community to council and not the voice of the council to the committee. To the community. The handbooks also recommends, due to the extensive nature of the economic development plan, the committee is encouraged to have separate committees and ad hoc committees work on parts of the plan and economic development opportunities as they arise, which we do, resulting in an average of 400 additional volunteer hours per year that our members provide to the city. The diversity of our volunteers, their passion for improving Lompoc, and their willingness to donate time above and beyond a 2-hour monthly meeting is damaged by focusing on attendance rather than the successes of the past 3 years. The handbook states a minimum of 4 meetings by the EDC, but we have chosen to meet 10 times a year. Why not require minimum attendance of 4 meetings a year rather than having a punitive 3 consecutive absences without permission rule? If council members are unwilling to develop a relationship with the current EDC members or feel strongly about enforcing the attendance issue, nominate who you want to remove and why, and vote tonight. According to the handbook, again, members of an advisory board serve at the pleasure of the city council and may be removed from office at council discretion. If, however, council would like to acknowledge that the committee was being proactive regarding attendance and wants to connect with current appointees, the committee looks forward to your attendance at any meeting or having a cup of coffee to discuss any issue. We are eager to hear each council member's concerns, to engage in ongoing communications with each council member, and to continue improving the business community in Lompoc as we have for the past 3 years. With honor and respect for the appointment to the Economic Development Committee, Janelle Osborne. That's all I have.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to all communications. This is your last opportunity to speak to the council concerning any item, and the person who wanted to speak to the library has left, so, but I think we have someone else.
My name is Kathy Rudolph. I am the current president of the Friends of Lompoc Library System. And I'm here just to, with a plea that as you're considering budget priorities and budget expenditures, that you give some thought to the great number of people in Lompoc who are served in so many ways by the library system. It's so much more than checking out books. And I'm speaking as someone who was a 10-year part-time employee as well as a volunteer and now and a friend of the library. The support groups do what they can, but that is just not the way for a business, if you will, to be run. The library needs to have consistent income that they can count on and a regular idea of what they're going to have to work with and when. Not just the support group kind of support that is keeping it going. The library serves from the youngest to the oldest, from the richest to the poorest, everything from people whose computers broke down who need a computer or a printer, to little kids coming in for story time, to homebound who are served by the library as volunteers serves them. To everything from people on skateboards and bicycles to BMWs. It doesn't matter. Everything from the woman who comes in who's just been diagnosed with cancer, whose doctor had no time to explain anything to her and is looking for information, to the guy whose car broke down, who needs a wiring diagram in the worst way so he can get to Santa Barbara to work tomorrow, that sort of thing. And everything in between. There's just so much. So I just would like to urge you that to really think about how many people and in how many ways the library serves the citizens of Lompoc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Molly Gerald, and I'm a resident of Lompoc and former library director. I'd just like to follow on the remarks that Kathy Rudolph made. I know this isn't a budget workshop. I was asked about did I know that before the meeting began, and I understand that. But as you look at what your priorities are, that certainly is what will guide your budget process. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that I do think the library is worthy of your support. And I know that all of you on the dais have been wonderful supporters of the library in non-governmental ways, in fundraising, and you've actually led the way, some of you, several of you, in that regard. And yet, at the end of the day, as Kathy Rudolph just said, the library needs a firm basis for support, and we do serve all ages and many different needs in the community. Our library director, who can't be there this evening because she had a major leg injury and had surgery today, told me when she moved from Flagstaff that her feeling is if there was ever a city that needed a good library, Lompoc is that city. That's because of our demographic. There are so many people who are trying to bring themselves up and become part of our community and follow those codes, follow those leads, build their resumes and things like that. So in closing, I'd like to say so much appreciation to our new city administrator for working to bring the library into full departmental status. We look forward to working with you in the budget process. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I checked out 2 books today. I love your automatic checkout system. It's got a lot of pictures in it.
Nick Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. Kind of trail on what was just said. The community development block grants was one source of funding that you've utilized previously for the library. I think that's an appropriate use of community block grant development funds. And as you've pulled out of the partnership and are now looking to apply directly, I think that that would be an excellent use of those funds for the library. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to come back to the council for council requests, comments, and meeting reports. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, as stated earlier, I'd like to ask, for consensus that we go ahead and get a report analysis on Frick Springs.
Okay, I'll second that. We need a third.
I'll go.
Okay, so we have a second and a third. What was the one that you cut me off on? What did I want to bring back? Just a quarterly update on the progress of the computer system. Just progress. So I need a second and a third.
I think it's a good idea. It'll keep us informed, keeps the public informed, and we'll have an answer.
Okay. Okay. So quarterly updates on progress of Councilmember Mosby.
I gave you a fourth.
A fourth, okay.
You need a fourth one.
Okay, sounds good. Any other council requests? Councilmember Mosby.
I've got a comment.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on a great fire and ice doings that we were there the other night, and what a great job they had, and I hope they made a lot of good money. It seemed like people were getting frisky with their bids there, and also what a good job the Elks did. It was a really good prime rib.
The ones that got prime rib.
should have been at our table.
Yeah, you got them all.
Okay. Councilmember Mosby. Councilmember Humdahl.
Okay, well, at the last city council meeting, we were discussing some information, and one was the home consortium funds. And after studying it and going back and look at it, I was hoping it would stay, but I would go ahead. I'm asking for a revote on the home consortium funds at the next council meeting.
So you're asking us to bring back for reconsideration?
Bring back for reconsideration.
Okay.
He's asking for a reconsideration of the vote.
Right.
Correct?
Because I was one of the few that...
Yes. Following Robert's rules, which we do, says that a member of the prevailing side of the vote can ask for reconsideration. And Mr. Homdahl, on the first of two votes, was on the prevailing side of the measure that was defeated. And I believe that's the particular question that he's asking reconsideration for.
That's right.
Okay. I'll second that. I think any member can bring it back. I don't think you need a second.
Only if you were on the vote.
Yeah, so I
can't
mean,
be against it, you got to be for it,
Yeah,
or whatever,
so-
how the vote went, so, yes.
so we can bring it back for reconsideration then? Yes?
We can do that if that's your...
Yeah.
Just one.
Normally, it would just take the one, certainly if we were in the same, meeting and you were later on, you'd already decided it. I've got to plead ignorance on this one aspect about, and unfortunately we're absent the parliamentarian who's our city attorney. So we can do this one of two ways. Either we can get a third, we have a first and a second, we can get a third and we'll bring it back for certain. Or we can leave it as it is with Mr. Homdahl's motion. I'll consult with the attorney, and if that's adequate, I can bring it back.
Okay. I've given a second. Does anyone want to give a third? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. It's my opinion, it's my understanding that any council member can bring it back for reconsideration. without any agreement. So.
Well, any one from the prevailing side.
Exactly right, which Mr.
Which
Humdahl
for the
is,
one
yeah.
motion, Mr. Holmdahl, on the first of the two motions.
That's right.
Was on the prevailing side.
Okay. Okay.
But let me question this. This was home, not CDBG,
Correct.
that he just said.
Yeah.
Correct, the home
It
fund.
was a 3-2 vote. The prevailing side
On the second vote.
was home consortium.
There were two different votes.
Right. The first one was to withdraw from the CDBG.
No, the first one was to.
No, I'm saying.
There were two votes.
There were two votes on the home issue, because you remember, I believe it was Mr. Lingle made the motion to follow staff's recommendation, stay in. That received a second, but failed on a 2-3 vote, with Mr. Holmdahl being one of the no votes. I believe it was Mr. Lingle and Mr. Mosby that voted yes, and there were 3 no votes, and that would have been Mr. Holmdahl, Mr. Vega, and you. And I think that's the motion. Then there was a subsequent motion that said we vote to withdraw, which also passed 3-2. The dissentings on that were Mr. Holmdahl and Mr. Lingle. He's asking for reconsideration on the first of the votes.
Okay.
I do have just
Sure,
a
go
couple of
ahead.
things. One is separate from that. One thing we were talking about grass and such. I understand we did send a letter out to all the property owners who have not cleaned their grass up yet in their park. I had asked to find that out today, so that's going good. And other than that, League of California Cities, we went to last Friday. Good turnout. Kind of a bad deal. Anybody coming from South County, because they had to turn and go through Lompoc instead of going up 101 in the Los Alamos. Not lost, but anyway, they had a mess. But it was a good turnout. It worked out real well for us. And then, of course, the fire and ice ball was the other deal I went to.
Councilmember Starbuck.
I guess I have a question to the city administrator very quickly. When would be the time that we would want to bring up backfilling the Human Services Commission's funding?
Now would be a good time, I guess.
Would this be a council request type of item?
If you'd like, I'd be happy to just put it on an upcoming agenda. If it's something you're trying to get incorporated into the budget process, we can do it 2 ways. Either we can have a discussion at a upcoming regular council meeting, let's say on the 21st, or we can use it as a topic of discussion during the budget process.
I guess my concern is that we're losing funding. We have new members on the council. They don't know the background. They don't know what's being asked. And I just think that before we get into the budget that we should maybe bring everybody up to speed on that.
Okay, so if you'd like, we can have a workshop on the topic and schedule that for April 21st.
Okay. A council workshop? A council workshop on when?
Well, I'm just saying, we can have a little workshop within the regular
Okay,
council.
okay.
You've got a regular council meeting on the night of the 21st. I don't think we can be prepared and meet our posting deadlines and our transparency deadlines to do it on the 7th. The earliest we'd be able to bring it to you is on the 21st. We're happy to do so if that's what 3 of you would like, I guess. Right, not as a separate workshop. I'm just saying we can do a little report. If I understand you right, you'd like to understand what the status is and discuss the issues behind the.
Exactly. Bring everybody up to speed here
Right.
on it.
And so we can do a staff report. Maybe staff report's the better way, rather than call a workshop. Do a staff report that discusses the Human Services Commission, what the past allocations and issues have been.
And I'll second the request. Do we have a third?
Third.
Okay. Councilmember Vega.
Just had a great time at the Fire and Ice Ball also. It was a great event. Food was really good. Prime rib was really good, Bob.
Did you get prime rib?
Yeah.
I think we had them stacked 3 high at our table.
Okay. Councilmember Mosby, do you have anything else to report? Okay. I've attended several meetings, none of them at the expense of the city, though. So if the, yours was? Okay, and you reported, that's good, okay. Okay, so if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned until the regularly scheduled meeting of April 7th.